Hey guys, Bilal from Itani.io here, and I'm with my friend Jan. And why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself here, Jan?
Hi everybody, my name is Jan Openkowski, also known as Sinjul online, and I'm a German strategy and fighting game player. And I've been playing fighting games since 2006. Also, I started playing StarCraft at that time, and I've been a fighting game tournament organizer since 2010 until today.
Okay, so Jan and I met each other online just via video games through a video game forum. We used to play a lot of stupid old games together, and so I'm curious, Jan. How did you start getting into games in general, and which of those games were kind of the ones you started with, or like held closest to you?
So I pretty much started playing in 1995 at the age of 5 or 6. I'm not too sure. It's been too long.
Okay.
And at that point at home, we had a Nintendo and a Super Nintendo. So I started playing the regular like Nintendo games, jump and run, sport games, pinball games, racing games, and also at that time I got kind of introduced to fighting games. But I think I started really playing games a lot, like 4 or 5 years later on computer.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was super young. I was in elementary school, and I think I started with machine. I don't know what the literal first game I played was. It was either Doom or Machines, but I just played tons and tons of Machines. So I was thinking about this because I recently was asked this. Somebody at work told me he's not into games. He doesn't really understand them, which I thought was interesting. The idea of not being able to understand it. And so, what made you choose like gaming specifically over, say, a different hobby like a sport?
Mm, well, I was also playing soccer when I was
Okay.
young,
Okay.
so I always did some sports
Mm-hmm.
during school until I was like sixth grade,
Mm-hmm.
and then it clashed. But for me, like video games were always really fun to play, and it's good that you can play alone or together with other people depending on the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, when you want to play soccer, you need one more than yourself.
Sure.
But with video games, you can play at any time on your own, and it's also like it's fun to accomplish something. And with video games, you always get a bit better. Like it's fun to play, and you just get better, and then you clear the game or level, and yeah, so it's just fun to play, fun to relax, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, okay. So kind of because you could just keep getting better at it and it didn't require like somebody else to play with, it's just easy to hop onto a game without getting a whole team going.
Yeah, I mean, when I started playing, that was before the internet.
Okay.
so so I guess like when you were young, the internet was a thing. But
Yeah.
when I started, there was no internet. Like we got internet, I think around 2000.
Mm.
So we had a computer since maybe like 97.
Okay.
But then the internet came up in like 2000 with uh, data flat rate internet, so DSL
Mm.
with a flat rate. And at that point, it became kind of easier playing games with other people. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
in,
I
in in the beginning, just offline, alone, or
Sure.
with my siblings.
Yeah, I mean, I played. I mean, obviously, like Machines was a multiplayer game technically, right? But I didn't touch that thing's multiplayer until like 15, 20 years later. Um, I mean, I when I started, I we had the internet, but we had dial-up kind of when I was growing up, and my dad never upgraded to like he upgraded to wireless like Wi-Fi like when I was in middle school. Like, and so we had, what was funny was when we had dial up. So obviously you would stream something and you'd kind of like watch the loading bar like go here slowly, like as you're streaming a flash game or a flash video, which I don't think kids now would ever understand. They'd freak out if they saw that on their phone. But and so one game that we played like a lot of those random flash games like the stick figure fights, and I don't know if you ever heard of Neopets, this website Neopets, where like it's kind of like Pokemon but with a lot of just different mini games. And
Okay, no, I never heard of that.
yeah, and so the mini games were all like flash games, and you could just play like, yeah. So we would leave a game to load like overnight or like for half the day, and then we'd come back to it and play it because we were on dial-up for so long. But yeah, I don't think I got into multiplayer gaming until like 8th or 7th grade, something like that.
Okay.
So
Sounds your internet experience sounds very expensive.
expensive.
It
Well,
was paid per hour, right, or per minute?
I'm
Something
not-
like that, right?
We might. I think we had a plan where we probably had like an unlimited plan or something. But which reminds me, the big downside was every time like my dad was on the phone, if we opened up a game, we opened up AOL, and then he starts hearing the awful screeching noise in his phone.
Yeah. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that. We also had dial-up at home, so it was always, are you going to have a phone call? Like, do you need to call somebody?
Yeah,
And then like everyone was like, no. Okay, then you could go online.
yeah,
But if anyone is like, no, I need to call somebody, or at some point they are like, I have to call somebody now,
Mhm.
and you're like in the middle of the game, and you're like, okay, I gotta go. Somebody needs to do a phone call.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable today, right?
yeah. And so yeah, so on that topic, I guess I also kind of, as a kid, I was crazy shy. Like I didn't talk to anybody, so it was just kind of second nature. Like the game was there, so I played it. It's like I don't have to go find somebody to like talk to or put the effort in to like.
Yeah.
So it was just really easy to get into for me as well.
I can relate. In my small hometown, when I was young, video games were not the thing. You were that weird
Weirdo.
addict guy,
Yeah.
kinda.
Okay.
So like you're kind of addicted to video games or something. But yeah, I mean, in that case, do you really want to play with people that are kind of baddies about bad mouthing your hobby? You
Yeah.
don't, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that stigma really changed now. Everybody's playing it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, okay, so you kind of got into those gaming from just like doing stuff on your own, but then the internet came. You had multiplayer. For me, I played a lot of Team Fortress. But what were some of those games that you played that were multiplayer that you put a lot of time into?
I remember when I was young, I used to play a lot of first-person shooters. So Unreal Tournament 99 or Quake 3. I mean, they were released at around the same time. And I know that I played a lot of Quake, and I actually had a clan at that time. But I also played a lot of strategy games. So mainly Command & Conquer Red Alert 2 online and Warcraft 3. Yeah, so I think I played like Red Alert first, and then when Warcraft was released in 2002, I switched to that. But I mainly just played fun maps because I didn't like the one-on-one gameplay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
no, it's all good. So, when you were playing those multiplayer games, what made you kind of pick and choose to get into like those more competitive ones where, let's say maybe they had a higher skill cap, or you were trying to be better than other players?
Like what got me into competitive gaming was the Korean StarCraft
Mm.
tournaments.
Okay.
So when I played Warcraft 3, I read a lot. But like maps, fun maps had descriptions and like what the map is based on, and there were a lot of maps that were saying like, "Hey, this is based on StarCraft Brood War, this map."
Hmm.
And then I was like, StarCraft Brood War, okay, I'll have a look.
Hmm.
And then I bought the game, and then I don't know how I stumbled upon the Korean Pro tournaments, but I saw some VODs, and I think it was late 2005, and then I started playing competitively uh, in 2006.
Okay.
So yeah, it was kind of this like this impulse from Korea that got me into competitive gaming actually.
Okay. So you kind of watched some VODs and you thought, oh, that's interesting, and kind of went
Yeah,
over there. Okay.
yeah. For me, it was like, wow, this is amazing. This is so crazy. At that time, there were like 100,000 people watching
Hmm.
grand finals live in Busan.
Oh, okay.
So it was like, whoa, this is totally crazy.
Yeah.
Why are so many people watching this live? I wanna
Yeah.
I wanna be like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just kept grinding, and yeah, it was really fun. It was really fun to play competitive and kind of get involved into one community
Mhm.
a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, I certainly think I always thought it was super. Well, yeah, I think it's really crazy that all of a sudden, like, you, like we were just describing video games, like we didn't have the internet, we didn't even play with anybody, and all of a sudden, like this game StarCraft just becomes huge, and everybody's watching it, and I, here, we don't have like a huge. Everybody plays video games, but we don't have the whole kind of esports stigma that they have in Korea, obviously. Obviously, I've never seen it in person, but I think it's amazing that I hear like people just kind of know about StarCraft, and everybody's like into video games a lot more than here. Whereas here, you still kind of have the half and half of, you play video games? That's cool. Okay, like people don't really, think you're kind of a weirdo, but okay, so that's interesting. But so StarCraft is kind of like the game you were mainly playing competitively, or what else were you playing?
Yeah, it was mainly StarCraft until 2010. Then I quit, and actually in 2006 I also got back into fighting games. But the thing is, that genre did not have online play until around 2009.
Okay.
So it was like I went to one tournament per year, and that's all I played, like with other people.
Okay.
Otherwise, it was just maybe hit up the practice mode at home
Mhm.
a bit, but I was not, to be honest, I was not very good. Even like 5 years later, I was kind of trash
Okay.
because you have nobody to play, and then the the motivation to practice, right, is kind of low because the next tournament is gonna be like in 1 year. So why practice now?
Yeah, yeah. When a lot of people are doing it, it's certainly a lot easier to get into, I think. So.
No,
Yeah.
but after online play was introduced, and it's kind of okay depending on the game. So it's actually that I think I was the most active in around 2013 as a player. Which is like 7 years after I got into the community. So it's kind of crazy, right? You're really interested in those games, but you can't play them because there's nobody around you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've had that experience. Yeah. Okay. So. Okay. Well. So kind of transitioning from that. So you've been kind of interested and involved in like playing those competitive games, and so. Based on that, what classifies a game as competitive versus just one of those more traditional style games?
I think the basic part is that it's player versus player, right? I think it's not really like the player numbers. like where you say, okay, you need 10,000 players to be competitive, but like you can have a small player base that is really, really competitive, and that gets really good, really strong. So for me, I would say it's pretty much just the player versus player thing. And you have stuff like speedrunning, right? But that's kind of the player playing against the game, and then they just compare who's faster, right? So it's no direct competition. Or you also don't impact the other player's game, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think for me it's just if you play against somebody, then it's already competitive.
That is interesting. I think as long as you can play against another player and get better, it's not just like a all random, then I guess that in some way you can always reach the skill cap, right? You can always get better until there's some skill cap there, right?
Yeah, in theory, if both players are constantly trying out new things and kind of pushing the skill cap, then yeah, it's possible. But usually it's very difficult because at some point you have your own game style and you just stick to it, and then you need kind of an impulse from outside, like a player that plays completely different, to change the game. So I guess even with two players, they can get really good, but they will be kind of stuck in a mindset.
Yeah. So okay, with that said, then so competitive is pretty much for you as long as it's PvP, but so how would you, let's say, what about a game makes those player versus player games more competitive, or makes the competitive experience better, would you say?
I would say it all depends on the game balance, because as a game developer, I guess you want to make an interesting game, so it's not always the same, or not all players have the same let's say units in case of strategy games, for example. So it's not always like all players have the same options, but then you have to check that these options are not completely different in strength. So I think to have a good competitive game, you want to give the player a lot of options, but they should be in balance with the options of the other player. So if you have let's say character A and character B, they have a different play style, but they should both be viable. So it's not that if somebody picks character A and the other one picks character B, character B is at a big disadvantage because, let's say, it cannot get closer or he does literally no damage, right? Then you don't need character B. So I think that's kind of what makes a good balanced game, and I think it's also why some games became very successful competitive or esport games.
Okay.
Just because if you have, for example, Counter-Strike, you have a lot of different strategies and both teams have different weapons, but kind of the play, like how you play, is the same. Like you use your gun and shoot, and the movement is the same on both sides. But just having this difference, if both teams had completely the same weapons and, let's say, the same goal, it would be kind of boring, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's one way. For example, Counter-Strike did it did a well job because they gave you different options,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was not broken.
Yeah. And they have, so they have, the teams can end up with different gold, you can buy different guns and so on, you can play differently even, so, yeah, I think that's true. And also, one of the biggest things is the fact that you're on different sides of the map, so, with different goals, like you said, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm getting there is, so it's kind of about you want to keep the game interesting with stuff like variation and the ability to have different play styles, but you also want to keep the game balanced. And that's kind of what makes these competitive games more fun rather than just a game that is competitive, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, if you do always the same thing and it's just about doing the same thing better, then at some point it becomes very stale, right? At least that was my experience with a few games. For example, StarCraft, I stopped playing after 4.5 years just because you need to be good at doing the same thing first before you can be creative in your playstyle. So it's at some point it's like, okay, against weaker players I just don't need to be creative. I just need to do the basic stuff better, and then you win.
That's
so
true.
It's kind of like, okay, a bit boring at some point.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Oh.
So then, if you had to define like balance in a sentence of a game, like how would you describe that?
Balance in a game. Balance in a game. Yeah, I guess it's, like I said, it's all about making options viable. For example, when I played StarCraft, I played Terran, and with Terran, you built factory units against Terran and Protoss, but you mainly used barracks units against Zerg. In that case, you had variety already, because depending on the matchup, you needed to build different units. But then you also had some units that were rarely used, but they were not completely unusable. So like in StarCraft, you have units that are difficult to use, but it's not like they don't work. So for example, you have the Ghost, where you can build the nuke add-on on the command center, and you can nuke a base. And you rarely do that because it's kind of risky. But it's an option, and then you see it in some very like high stake games, and you're like, what is this completely crazy? They're playing for money, and then they do this crazy stuff. I think that's how you do it. Like you give this option, and it's not the go-to option all the time, but at some point, maybe at some point you should.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And that's, I certainly think so as well. That it makes the game more interesting when you have a lot of stuff you can do, but maybe it's not the best option all the time, or maybe you can only do it 1% of the time. So, Okay.
Maybe with other genre, for example, fighting games, why do you have so many characters? Like, why do you have 30 characters? Yeah, because you have different playstyles, and or people like different designs. So maybe you have characters that kind of do the same thing, or they have the same moveset, but they look different. So you can have this, like you can have the big muscular boxer, but you can also have like a, let's say, more like you have a female boxer that is really fast and more technique. So they look the same, right? They go in, they dash in and punch. But design-wise, they're completely different. So it's also, you want to attract the player into liking a character, or in RTS affection and
Mhm.
keep playing. So
Mhm.
that's why you give these options.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so on that, you and I spent a lot of time playing older games, like we played some Dark Rain and we played some Machines and so on.
Yeah.
So those games are obviously very flawed. so what, so what would you say that makes games like that less successful than, let's say, StarCraft, and how could they improve?
I think in with these games, I mean, they are really old.
Yeah.
So at that point, some games needed like connecting to people via IP,
Hmm.
while games like StarCraft had a global server or like regional server where you connect to and you have a chat room and you can find games through a lobby.
Right.
If you don't know the IP of somebody,
Yeah.
then you can't play online. Of
Yeah.
course, that's one thing, but also like I guess with StarCraft, the thing is compared to these strategy games, the like controlling the units just felt much better. At
Mhm.
least I like machines units don't react at all. Like
Yeah.
you don't really want to micro, and I know it's the same thing with, for example, Command and Conquer. Like I'm playing a community version of Red Alert right now,
Hmm.
and the best thing you can do with infantry is move into range and then stop them moving so they just shoot and stop moving.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, how is that micro? Like how is that unit control? And with StarCraft, it's if you see units approaching, then you can just move a bit back, get into position, and then move in. Or if you see, okay, I'm at a disadvantage, you can still run. So it's very we have a lot of movement in the units, and I think it's the same with machines or with I played Earth 2160
Hmm.
as well. Some well, I don't know, like 2 years ago again with some people,
Okay.
and the base game is really bad because it's just you get resources and then you just spam units,
Hmm.
and the game is really hard counter reliant.
Hmm.
So it's it's not very fun to play, just massing units and hope like the other player built the units you counter. Because I know that they're like what is it? Lunar Corporation has like an electric gun that jumps from unit to unit.
Hmm.
And if you don't have shields researched, then everything just explodes in like 2 shots. And then your whole army just explodes from like 3, 4 units.
Right.
And it's like tier 1. It's like the first unit you can build. It's
Mm.
just a different weapon for that.
Okay.
So that like the game starts and then you have to counter, like you have to hard counter, and it's really bad.
Okay.
But a community mod um, made it much better. So it introduced like you gathered less resources, so the game was like slower pace, not that many units, and you could so actually you could micro because your units didn't die in like 1 second.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, that's one thing. I think that also divides like StarCraft from the other RTS. Also, machines was really slow pace,
Yeah.
build times far too long. So
Yeah.
it was not just units not reacting. 3 minutes to build a tier 2 unit. No,
3 minutes.
no, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You just have to think about that. It's crazy.
Yeah. You just spend a lot of time kind of sitting there in that game. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of the things you mentioned there, actually, I feel like I can relate in a lot of RTSs. Like when you mentioned in Command and Conquer, where you kind of just make a big army and you press stop and then they fire automatically. That we did the same thing in Dark Rain a lot, and I remember that was the only way I could figure out how to play that game.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was also one reason why in Dark Reign infantry kind of sucked,
Okay.
because tanks could shoot while
Right.
driving.
Yep.
And in Red Alert, or like in Command and Conquer, it's the same thing. Why
Mm.
is the game so tank spam reliant? Because tanks can move and shoot. Infantry cannot, and infantry is much, much slower. So it's like Command and Conquer is all about tank rush, and Dark Reign seemed to be also just tank rush and expand.
Yeah.
You could build more tanks. So yeah, to be honest, as a player, it's kind of boring. It's
Yeah.
really, really boring to play, just building one unit and then like clicking left and right so shots miss. Oh god, like it's boring. It's just
Yeah,
boring to play.
and also with Dark Reign, it was similar to what you said with Earth 2160, where you basically just get resources and mass the, I think it was the skirmish tank or something, that one that moves
No.
and shoots. So, but for me, those games were fun to ironically go back to and see how good you can get with the horrible mechanics. So so kind of like in a same way as you might make fun of the Room.
Yeah. The thing is, the games are actually not bad. It's
Yeah.
just very small things that are kind of bad. Like,
Right.
for example, machines, if you sped up the game by like 3 times, like maximum build rate is like 1 minute, then it's totally okay. Everything is a bit faster, and one match doesn't take an hour. Then the game is already okay. Okay, AI is kind of bad. Like units don't know how to shoot or move, but hey, it's okay. But in that game, it's just the time it takes to finish.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Yeah. And also, as for communities improving projects, that's kind of where Supreme Commander Forged Alliance is at, which is one RTS I really like a lot, but they have a modding community that keeps it consistent, and I think that's very cool. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. Okay, so nearing the end here, do you want to tell me a bit about like kind of what you're doing with Hessen Crash and how you got into organizing tournaments and all that?
Okay, so Hessen Crash is a fighting game based tournament, and the name comes from the Korean Tekken Crash. It's a Tekken TV program that they had at that time. I'm not sure if it's still running. And Hessen is pretty much the state that I live in.
Okay.
So it's kind of like Texas or Washington,
Yeah.
or whatever you want to call it. What state you prefer. And I started doing the event in 2010 after Street Fighter 4 was released, because there were a lot of tournaments that were focused only on Street Fighter 4. But I started playing before that game was released, and saw a lot of players that played before Street Fighter 4 were kind of stranded because they wanted to maybe play Street Fighter 3 or Street Fighter 2 or maybe Guilty Gear or some King of Fighters. But because the Street Fighter 4 events were kind of packed, they didn't want anyone that doesn't play the game there. So that's how it all started. And then since 2011, I've been doing the event twice a year. Well, this year it's kind of canceled. Thank you, Corona. But yeah, so I've been the head organizer since 2010, and we started with 20 guys in my hometown. People actually coming from all over Germany to my hometown, where no other player was except me.
Right.
And now it's around 100 to 150 players coming. And it's still very community based, so it's not like this big show where you go and you just watch. Like we have these famous players and you watch and you're like, oh my god, that guy's so good. You just bring your own stuff and you sit down and you can play whatever you want, or you can participate in tournaments I'm organizing. So it's more, I would say it's more like space for people to do what they want to do with fighting games than like a 100% tournament, I would say.
Okay. So kind of like a tournament LAN party sort of mixture.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of more like a LAN party with tournaments.
Yeah. Well, sounds pretty awesome. So what's your current favorite fighting game right now?
My current favorite fighting game. Oh boy. uh, I wrote down my top 3, and my top 3
Okay.
are Power Instinct 3, Groove on Fight, Kanos Revenge, also known as Fighters History Dynamite,
Mhm.
and the King of Fighters 2002 Unlimited Match. So the first 2 are kind of niche games. Like Groove on Fight, I've only been playing in Japan pretty much.
Okay.
And Kanos Revenge, the company Data East was sued by Capcom
Mhm.
because it was so resembling Street Fighter 2 that they sued them. But
Okay.
for me, the game is just more fun to play than Street Fighter 2.
Sure.
And King of Fighters 2002 Unlimited Match. I like the series, and for me, it's just the best game out of all the games. So it spans from 94 till 2003, and then 3 more games.
Mhm.
So there's a lot. And I think they pretty much just nailed how the game is supposed to be. You have difficult combos. Like you have easy combos and you have difficult combos.
Mhm.
And the game is very fast-paced. It's just fun to play. There's always stuff to learn, and I think that's how a game should be,
Mhm.
where you don't need to do the most difficult stuff in the game, but if you want to, you can do that.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, it's great having you on here, man. It's a pleasure talking as always, and I hope hopefully you enjoyed it too. And thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Thank you very much for having me, Bilal.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll visit again.
Yeah. Sure.